7 Rules to Survive the Library of Lost Names. Terrifying Rule Horror Story. Part 1. The Whisper Beneath the Shelves. They say the old Carnegie Library downtown was closed due to budget cuts. They lied. I found out the truth on a Wednesday night when a storm knocked the power out across half the city. My phone had died. The streets were flooded, and the only shelter nearby was the old library. It stood at the edge of the city park, 4 stories of stone and silence, untouched since 1972. But the front door was unlocked. That was the first warning. Inside, the air was thick with old paper and something more metallic, like rusted iron or dried blood. Lightning flashed through stained glass windows, throwing warped shadows across rows of forgotten bookshelves. I didn't mean to stay, but curiosity outweighs common sense when you're cold, wet, and 22 with no ride home. In the dim light, I found a desk with an ancient brass lamp. When I turned it on, the bulb flickered. Not literally, but the world around me seemed to shiver, like reality had hiccuped. That's when I heard it. A whisper, faint, raspy, coming from beneath the floorboards. Find your name. I should have run, but the voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded lonely. I followed it, down a spiral staircase hidden behind a false wall in the reference section, past shelves of forgotten encyclopedias, and into a chamber that didn't match the library's blueprints. I knew that because I once worked in city archives. This room shouldn't exist. It was circular, lined with shelves that stretched into impossible darkness. The air was stale, unmoving, heavy with the weight of secrets. And at the center stood a podium. On it, an open book. I stepped closer. The pages were filled with names. Thousands, maybe millions. All handwritten, all in the same spidery ink. As I scanned down the entries, I found something that made my chest seize. My name. Full. First, middle, last. Written in ink that hadn't dried. As I reached to touch it, a cold gust of wind slammed the chamber shut behind me. Then a new whisper rose, louder this time, spoken from every shadow. You've entered the Library of Lost Names. To leave with your soul intact, obey the rules. And then the rules appeared. They weren't written in the book. They burned themselves into the walls, letter by glowing letter. The 7 rules of the Library of Lost Names. 1. Do not read your name aloud. It gives the shelves power over you. 2. Choose only one book to hold. 2. And the shelves will never let you leave. 3. Never step into the aisle of forgotten children. You'll know it by the lullaby. 4. If a librarian asks you a question, answer with a question. This keeps them confused. 5. When the lights flicker, cover your eyes. Some books walk during the dark. 6. Return the book before dawn, or the name inside becomes yours forever. 7. To leave, you must remember who you were. Even if the shelves try to rewrite you. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled. This wasn't a prank or some immersive art project, because as the rules finished glowing, the shelves began to move. Something woke up, and I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Part 2. The Shelves That Breathe. I pressed myself against the nearest shelf as the rows began to shift, grinding and groaning. like ancient tectonic plates. Books fell. Dust danced. The floor trembled beneath my feet. Then, silence. Heavy, pressing, listening. The shelves had moved into a new pattern. The exit was gone. In its place, a long corridor opened to my left, the ceiling impossibly high, cloaked in shadows. And from somewhere deep in that darkness came the lullaby. Soft, sweet, sung by a child that didn't exist. Hush now, little one. The books will keep you safe. Rule 3, then another. Fables, obituaries. Wait, obituaries? That's when I noticed something strange. Every aisle had a faint hum, like a low static. But this one, marked obituaries, was silent, utterly still. No air, no motion. I felt watched, judged. Then something cold brushed my ankle. I flinched, heart hammering, and looked down. A single book lay on the floor, spine cracked, open to a page with a photo, an obituary. The name under it? Mine. Same birth date, same childhood photo. The cause of death: declared missing after entering a condemned public building. Presumed dead. I staggered back, nearly dropping my phone. Its screen flickered, battery at 1%. A soft voice echoed behind me, too close. Why didn't you return your book? I spun around. There stood a woman in a tattered gray librarian's dress, her name tag cracked and unreadable. Her eyes were hollow, sockets dark like burned-out bulbs. In her hands, she held a book tightly, clutching it like it was part of her. I remembered Rule 4. If a librarian asks you a question, answer with a question. Swallowing fear, I whispered, "Why are you still holding yours?" She blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Smoke curled from her ears. She stepped backward, confused. Then, just like that, she vanished between the shelves. I ran. Down corridors that didn't exist a moment ago. Past shelves labeled in languages I didn't understand. Every book buzzed with energy, stories screaming to be read, to be remembered. But Rule 2 haunted me. Choose only one book to hold. I couldn't touch them, couldn't even look too closely. But the temptation was real. Some books whispered. One called my name in my mother's voice. Another smelled like Christmas mornings from my. I nearly stopped, nearly reached out, until the lights flickered. Rule 5. When the lights flicker, cover your eyes. I dropped to my knees and buried my face in my arms. Darkness pulsed in waves. Footsteps, wet and heavy, slapped the marble floor near me. Breathing, growling. A book walked past me. I swear to God, it dragged a chain of bookmarks behind it like bloody tendrils. Then, silence again. I opened my eyes. Ahead of me, the shelves parted. In the center of the clearing stood a book on a pedestal. Small, leather-bound, with a title embossed in gold. The One You Forgot. My heart sank, because I recognized the handwriting. It was mine. Part 3. The Book That Remembers You. The moment I saw the handwriting on the cover, my handwriting, I hesitated. Rule 2 echoed in my skull like a warning bell. Choose only one book to hold. I hadn't picked one yet. But this book, why did it know me? My hands moved on their own, trembling. drawn by a force deeper than curiosity. As my fingers touched the cover, the room pulsed, like the entire library took a single breath. The moment I lifted the book, the shelves around me groaned and shifted, forming a circle, trapping me inside. Then, the whispers began. They came from the book, not in words, but in feelings, memories. Scenes from my life flashed across the room like film projected on the air. Me as a child, burying a drawing under the floorboards. A fight with my sister I hadn't thought about in years. My first lie. My first fear. This book is remembering me. Suddenly, something clicked behind me. A chair. Wooden. Ancient. It hadn't been there before. On it sat a man, or something shaped like one. Skin pale and slick, like wax left in the sun. Eyes completely black, reflecting the pages in my hands. He wore a long maroon coat stitched from library cards. Each one bore a name and a date of death. His voice was silk and wrought. You've chosen well. Few pick their own story. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. But now you must read it out loud, all of it, or stay here forever as a blank page. Rule 6 flashed in my head. Never read your book aloud, even if someone demands it. My mouth had already started forming the words. Wait, I blurted, barely catching myself. Why do you want me to read it? The figure tilted his head slowly, like a puppet trying to understand emotion. A hiss, a flicker of candlelight behind his eyes. Because unfinished stories become monsters. Then the walls shuddered. Something screamed between the pages. My book squirmed in my grip like a trapped animal. Letters crawled across the cover, forming and unforming my name. I dropped it. The book hit the floor with a thud and exploded in a cloud of black smoke. The man vanished. The chair toppled backward into nothing, and the shelves opened again. A path revealed itself, lit by a single flickering lantern hanging from a wire above. I didn't question it. I ran. I passed signs I didn't understand. Endings, regrets, corrections, and then I saw her. The same ghostly librarian from earlier, waiting beside a massive wooden door, carved with faces screaming in silence. She raised a skeletal finger to her lips. Shh. Then handed me a tiny note card. 7 words were scrawled on it in blood-red ink. You haven't broken Rule 7 yet. Part 4. The Forbidden Archive. The librarian vanished the moment I touched the door. Not faded, not walked away. She was simply gone. I was left holding the blood-red note. You haven't broken Rule 7 yet. Rule 7, the last rule. The one I hadn't seen. Panic flared. Why hadn't I read the full list? I reached into my pocket for the paper, but it was gone, swallowed by the library. I turned to the door. It was unlike the others, made of charred wood with strange grooves like scratch marks. Whispered syllables pulsed from behind it, like voices chanting in reverse. The handle was cold iron, and when I grabbed it, a jolt ran through my spine, like electricity laced with memory. The door opened into darkness, not just dim, true void. A staircase descended into the unknown, each step made of worn stone and names carved into them. Names of people I recognized, some long dead, some still alive. What was this place? I took the first step. The door slammed shut behind me. I descended for what felt like hours. The further I went, the more I felt watched. The air turned thick with ink and mildew. My flashlight flickered. And then I reached the bottom. A chamber. Silent, endless. Shelves curved upward like cathedral walls. There were no titles, no colors, just books with faces. Each book had a human face stretched over the cover. Some asleep, some screaming, some silently weeping. Eyes bulged, lips trembled. This was the Forbidden Archive, and in the center of it stood a mirror, cracked, tall, covered in ash. I approached, unable to stop myself. My reflection shifted with every step, aging, dying, reborn, melting, screaming. When I stood directly before it, I saw myself holding a book. That book, the one I had dropped. But in the reflection, I was smiling. Then a voice from behind me, soft, childlike. If you open a second book, you belong to us. I turned. No one was there, only a new shelf, and on it, my book had returned. Breathing. It trembled, its spine rising and falling like lungs. Curiosity clawed at me. I reached out, heart pounding, fingers inches away. And then I remembered. Rule 2. Choose only one book to hold. I had already chosen. Touching this again could be a trick, a trap. But then from the silence, a shape emerged. A young girl, no older than 10, dressed in tattered pajamas, eyes glassy and hollow. She pointed to the book and whispered, "You forgot your ending." The moment she said it, the mirror cracked louder, splitting down the center. My reflection grinned and held up a card. Rule 7. Never meet the author. The girl turned to ash. The lights went out. And from behind the shelves, I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming for me. Part 5. The author who was never born. I didn't breathe, didn't dare. The footsteps echoed louder now. Not just one pair, multiple. Some limped, some dragged, some clicked like talons on marble. I backed away from the breathing book, stepping into shadows as the first figure appeared. It wasn't human. It wore a long coat made of stitched book pages, each one inked with crossed-out names. Its head was wrapped in parchment, and where its eyes should be, there were just 2 glowing call numbers, 398.2. It paused, sniffed the air, and spoke in a voice that wasn't sound, but memory. "You opened the story. Now you must finish it." I stumbled backward, only to slam into another shelf, causing a Facebook to tumble off and land open at my feet. The face on the cover was mine. My eyes, my mouth. And when I looked inside, it was my entire life, chapter by chapter. Birth. I hadn't written that. The creature pointed to the mirror, now cracked but glowing faintly. "Finish the chapter, or the library writes it for you." The shelves behind it began to move, shifting like a maze. New paths opened, new lights flickered. And I understood. This was a test, a maze to find the truth, or die lost among names. I ran. The corridors twisted unnaturally, books whispering, walls bleeding ink. Occasionally, I'd glimpse old memories flicker in the corner of my vision. My mom reading to me, my childhood dog, The girl I never said goodbye to. The library was showing me my regrets. And then I found it. A room at the center of the maze. Old, circular, filled with writing desks made of bone. Candles shaped like fingers. And in the middle, a man. Or what used to be a man. He sat hunched over a typewriter, with no paper, tapping endlessly at keys that made no sound. His body was thin, translucent, like he had been erased bit by bit. Only his hands remained solid, moving inhumanly fast. I whispered, "Are you the author?" He didn't look up, but the typewriter stopped. Then slowly, he turned his head, revealing a blank face. No mouth, no eyes, just one thing etched in bloody ink across his forehead. Rule 7 broken. The room began to quake. Books from outside howled, voices crying out like a funeral choir. The author rose, and suddenly his hands began typing again. But now my legs moved on their own. I was being pulled toward the desk. Pages flew into the air, each one stamped with my face. "You met the author?" the voice inside my head whispered. "Now the ending is no longer yours to choose." I screamed, and the next thing I knew, I was sitting at the desk, hands typing, writing this story. Part 6. The author's pen and the end of everything. I couldn't stop typing. My fingers moved on their own accord, as though the typewriter had become an extension of my mind, twisting the words into shapes they should never take. I watched in horror as the words formed, but I couldn't stop them. I tried to pull my hands away, but it was as if my fingers were rooted to the keys. The weight of the pen, no, the weight of the story itself, was far too much to escape. And then, another figure entered the room. A shadow, long and thin, like it had been stretched too far. The lights flickered as the creature moved closer. I could hear its breath, hollow, like wind in a cave. It was the author. No longer the thing that typed, but the thing that controlled everything. "You've reached the end," it said, its voice low and raspy, like pages scraping together. "But you still don't understand the most important rule." The room spun. The walls crumbled away, revealing the raw void, the infinite nothing that stretched beyond comprehension. The shelves, the books, everything I had just seen was now a false memory. The author stepped closer, reaching for the typewriter. I recoiled in fear, but my body was frozen. "Rule number 1, the voice echoed inside my skull, "is don't try to read ahead." "What does that even mean?" I gasped, my voice trembling. "I can't move. I can't leave." The author's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't human. "You've been writing this entire time," it whispered. "You've been part of the story since the beginning. You think you're the reader? You're not. You're just another name, another forgotten tale. And now, your story is my story." The air thickened with the weight of finality. Suddenly, the library's darkness deepened. Shadows moved like writhing, terrible shapes, creatures that were once human, but now consumed by ink and forgotten stories. Their eyes were filled with the void, staring into mine as though they knew me better than I knew myself. I looked down at the typewriter, and the words that now appeared, written in dark, wet ink. "The end has come. You are part of the library now. forever lost, forgotten in the pages of what should never have been written. I could feel my mind unraveling, slipping through cracks like ink through water. I realized something then. The author wasn't controlling the story. He had become the story. I was just a reflection in a never-ending mirror. I tried to scream, but my voice didn't leave my throat. The darkness thickened, like paper drowning in ink, and I could feel myself fading into the very words I had just typed. But I had one final question for the author. Can I rewrite the end? The author didn't answer. He never had to. Part 7. The last name written. I had lost track of time. Or perhaps I had lost the ability to even understand it. The Library of Lost Names wasn't a place anymore. It was the only thing that existed. Everything that I had once known felt distant, like shadows of a forgotten life. I was trapped, not by physical walls, but by something far more sinister. I had become a part of the story, an unwritten name destined to disappear as if it had never been spoken. The author, now standing at the center of this decaying world, watched me, silent and still. Its hollow eyes held no sympathy. It didn't need to speak. It didn't need to explain itself. The story had already been written. I stumbled back, my legs weak, my vision blurred by the overwhelming darkness that had consumed the library. The shelves, once filled with books, had morphed into jagged, broken ruins, each fragment a forgotten tale. Tales that had never been told. The air was thick with the scent of dust and ink, the very substance that held these memories together. I thought of the rules that had kept me alive so far. But now, there was only one rule left. Rule number 7, the author's voice echoed, as though coming from everywhere, from the pages of every forgotten book, from the ink itself. You can't escape until you write the last name. The words were not just a command, they were a curse. I felt the weight of them pressing down on my chest, suffocating me with the gravity of their meaning. To leave this place, I had to write. But it wasn't just any name. It had to be the last name, my name, or the name of someone who had been lost here before me, swallowed by the pages of stories that never had an ending. I closed my eyes, trying to resist the pull. But the typewriter was there, as if it had always been waiting for me. The keys were cold beneath my fingertips, like they were made of stone. A single sheet of paper lay in front of me, its surface blank. But I could feel the weight of its purpose. The shadowy figures that had once been mere wraiths now moved in slow, deliberate steps toward me. They were silent, their faces twisted into expressions of eternal despair. They had all been part of the library, just like me. They were all forgotten names, all written down and never heard from again. "You are already written," one of them whispered, its voice like the rustling of brittle pages. "You can't escape." I felt the cold of the typewriter seep into my hands, urging me to begin, but I couldn't bring myself to write. I was afraid that once I wrote, I would lose all of who I was, become just another shadow on the pages. But then I realized something. I had to write my name, not to end the story, but to begin something new. I had to rewrite the rules. I had to break the cycle. I placed my fingers on the keys, and I began to write. My name is But before I could finish, the ground beneath me shuddered. The library was alive, awake. The air pulsed with an ominous energy. I had written something that shouldn't have been written. And in that moment, I realized the terrifying truth. The story would never end. It was always going to be rewritten, over and over again. And I would always be a part of it. Part 8. The endless rewriting. I had written my name, half finished, when everything stopped. The shadows, the figures, the overwhelming presence of the library. It all froze. It felt like time itself had been paused. The air was thick with silence. My hands still hovered above the typewriter, fingers aching from the pressure. But I was no longer sure whether it was me writing or the library itself forcing my hand. The key with my name on it? It didn't seem to belong to me anymore. It was like a part of something far older, far more dangerous. I slowly lifted my fingers from the keys, and as I did, the library shifted again, this time with a deafening screech. The shelves groaned, their edges bending as though they were alive. Every piece of paper, every book, seemed to ripple as if being rewritten in real time. And then I heard it, a low, echoing voice. It sounded like a whisper, but it was everywhere. It was coming from the walls, the floor, the very air around me. You should have never started writing. I turned, heart pounding, but no one was there. The typewriter clicked as if urging me to continue. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, unable to break free from the grip the library had on me. The pages, the stories, they all seemed to merge together. The entire place was shifting into something new, something far darker. The figures, the ones who had once been the lost names, now surrounded me, their hollow eyes staring into me. I tried to look away, but it was impossible. They were all waiting, expecting me to finish the story. They were waiting for me to complete the last name. A cold hand brushed against my arm. "Right," the voice said again. "Finish the story." I recoiled, yet my hand moved on its own. The keys clicked under my fingertips, as though possessed by something greater. And I wrote, "My name is..." The words flooded the paper, filling up the space with an eerie glow. The letters began to shimmer, like they were trying to escape from the page. The ground beneath me shook harder now, a deep rumble that echoed through the library, causing the books to fall like rain. The voice that had been whispering now roared, "You should not have written it." But it was too late. The name was now complete, and suddenly, the walls cracked. The shelves crumbled, books falling like brittle ashes, and the library began to collapse, as if my act of writing had triggered its destruction. I scrambled to my feet, desperate to escape, but the room was closing in on me. The last thing I saw was a shadow rushing toward me, a figure reaching for the paper, the name I had written, and then nothing. Part 9. The final name. I woke up on the cold, hard floor, gasping for air. My body trembled, but there was no pain. There was only the feeling of emptiness, of something missing. The library was gone. In its place was an endless void of blackness. No walls, no shelves, no books, no voices, just an oppressive, suffocating silence that surrounded me. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, as if it were trying to escape the emptiness that had taken the library's place. I had escaped, but at what cost? The piece of paper with my name, the name I had written, was gone. And yet in the deep, terrifying silence, a voice whispered in the back of my mind, "It's not over yet." I looked around. There was nothing, just the dark, the void, and the endless feeling of something just out of reach. The voice whispered again, "You think you've escaped, but the library never forgets." And then it hit me. My name, the one I had written, it wasn't just mine anymore. The library had claimed it. And now, my fingers trembled as I scrambled to find the typewriter. But it wasn't there. The paper wasn't there. There was only the voice echoing in my skull, each syllable twisting and tightening its grip on me. "You didn't finish it. The name, the story. You have to finish." I couldn't breathe. The walls of this place seemed to be closing in. The shadows shifted, dancing in my peripheral vision. The whispering grew louder until it felt like it was inside my head. "The name must be completed. The final piece must be written. Only then can you be free." I tried to speak, but no words came out. My body was paralyzed, my throat dry. I reached out, trying to grab something, anything, but there was nothing. Just the blackness, suffocating me. And then I felt it, a presence behind me. Slowly, I turned, dread curling in my stomach. A figure, dark and towering, stood at the far end of the void. Its eyes were black, voids in the darkness, like empty wells, pulling everything into them. "You must finish," it said. "Write the final name." The figure took a step toward me. Each movement sent a shiver through my bones. It reached out with long, thin fingers, pulling something from its chest. It was paper. In the paper, there was one last line, the final name. My name. The name I had written was no longer mine. It had taken root in the library, and now the library wanted to claim it entirely. It wanted to claim me. I reached for the paper, trembling, but it was no use. As soon as my fingers brushed it, the darkness seemed to pulse. Energy surged through me, pulling me into the void. The name was the key to the library's power, and now it was my turn to write it again. I tried to resist, but the darkness overpowered me. My fingers began to move on their own, writing my name over and over again in the air, on the paper, in the void. A cycle. The name echoed, and then the library returned. Part 10, the final chapter. My hands continued to write, automatically, as if possessed by the very essence of the library. The name, my name, formed on the paper in endless loops, repeating and echoing throughout the darkness. It was as if my very soul was being drained, consumed by the void around me. The presence behind me loomed larger, its oppressive energy pressing against my chest. I could hear its breathing, slow, deep, and terrifying. The shadows seemed to breathe with it, an endless, unrelenting cycle of death and rebirth. "You are mine now," the voice whispered. It was cold, like the wind that howls through a crypt. "The library has claimed you. and your name is the key to all its doors. My fingers froze mid-motion. The last letter of my name hovered on the paper, the ink seeping into the page like blood from a wound. I wanted to stop, to break free, but I couldn't. The darkness around me was too strong, too consuming. I was trapped in this endless loop, and the library was the only thing left in the world. But then, a shift. A sudden flash of light broke through the suffocating dark. A sound, a crackling, like the breaking of glass. The figure behind me stumbled, its form shifting and warping, losing its shape. The voice, once so powerful, faltered. I could feel the grip on me loosening, just a little. I looked up, barely able to believe my eyes. The figure behind me was dissolving, its form dissipating into smoke and shadows. It was weakening. The library was losing its hold on me. I pushed myself to my feet, shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. The presence of the library was still there, but it was fading, as if it had never been as strong as I had believed. Fear filled my mind. Was this really possible? Could I escape? The light continued to grow, pushing against the dark, cutting through the void like a knife through cloth. I took a step forward, my legs trembling beneath me, and then another. The darkness recoiled, like a creature afraid of the light. Each step I took, I felt stronger. Then I heard it, a sound like paper turning. I looked down at the paper in my hands. The name was no longer mine. It had shifted. It had taken on a new form, a new identity. The name written on the paper was someone else's, a name I had never seen before. I turned back to the void. The library was gone. The figure that had once been behind me was completely dissolved into smoke. The darkness had retreated, and in its place, there was only light. I breathed in deeply, the air feeling fresh and clean in my lungs. I was free. But then, a thought crossed my mind. What if I wasn't the only one to escape? I turned quickly, looking around at the empty space that had once been the library. I didn't know how long I had been trapped there, but I felt the presence of others, other names, floating in the darkness. Their echoes were still faint, but I could feel them. The library hadn't forgotten them. They were still here. I wasn't sure if I had truly escaped, or if I had simply become part of the library itself. I didn't know how many others had been trapped like me, writing their names into eternity, only to become lost to the shadows. But as I stepped out of the void, I realized one thing. I wasn't the only one with a story to tell. Psst, thank you for staying till the end. If your heart's still beating, maybe it's time to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be waiting here every week with a new nightmare just for you. Remember, in the silence, something always listens back.